Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were John, David, Tom, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sand bank underneath the roots of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lanes, but don't go into Mr. Brown's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. Brown. Now run along, and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella, and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns.
John, David, and Tom, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. Brown's garden, and squeezed under the gates. First he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and then he ate some radish, and then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley.
But round the end of a cucumber frame, Peter met Mr. Brown unfortunately. Mr. Brown was on his hands and knees, planting out young cabbages. But he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rag and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and ran faster, and almost escaped the chase, if he had not run into a gooseberry nest. Peter gave himself up for lost, and shed big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself.
Mr. Brown came up with a sieve which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and pushed into a tool shed, and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in, if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. Brown was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Hachee!" Mr. Brown was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of the water, upsetting 3 pounds. The window was too small for Mr. Brown, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work.
Peter sat down to rest, as he was so tired. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he did not know which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a while, he began to wander about, going flippily, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no place for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. Then an old little mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the house. Peter asked her the way to live, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him, as she did not know. Nobody to help him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. After a time, he came to a pond where Mr. Brown filled his water cans, and a white fat cat was staring at some goldfish in the pond. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter knew he better go away without talking to her, as he had heard about cats from his cousin Benjamin Bunny.
He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Peter scuttled underneath the bush, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peered over. The first thing he saw was Mr. Brown, hoeing onions. His back was toward Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow. He started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some black-currant brush. Mr. Brown caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. Brown handed out the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow, to frighten the blackbird.
Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he fell down upon the live-salt sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and soused his eye. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had not in a fortnight. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But John, David, and Tom had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end.